Patty asked for you to show the deer foot a little more carefully.
Okay, so there's the deer foot. It's like looks like a deer hoof. Like a deer had one foot and was walking along.
Very, very small deer.
Yeah, very small deer with a very hairy foot. It would look like this. Hey watercolor wizards, Hajra here. Thanks for parking your brushes here and let the epic art adventures begin. Alright, so today we're going to be doing the Zorn palette, and this is one of my favorite palettes. Make sure you have your sketch done up, and also get out a piece of paper. We're going to do a Zorn palette color wheel on. It can be a stamped color wheel, it can be a stenciled color wheel, it can be a blank piece of paper. Today I'll be using gouache. Apart from this palette, I've got an angle brush, a few rounds, and a really tiny spotter here. I'm painting at postcard size today. Here you have the two wells, and one of them is going to be for the dirty water, where I rinse out the brushes. This is where I get the clean water. You can also have a separate dropper bottle so that you can end up having just clean water dropped in drop by drop, so it's more measured. I've got 140-pound cold pressed watercolor paper, and this time I'm using the more textured size, the front side. You should also have a towel or a washcloth. I have that underneath my cup, so I won't show it to you. You can have paper towels too, but they're more wasteful. I've just got a simple palette here. Again, arrange it like your color wheel, okay, with the yellow and the red and the blue, in this case, which is our black, standing in equidistantly, and I've got the white in the middle that I'm going to use to make pastels and sort of keep cleaner, okay? And I've also added some water to all of them to keep them nice and saturated. The brand is Cretacolor, so this is Cretacolor Aqua Brick. You can also get those from Lens or online. I've got the yellow right there. And as I always do when I'm mixing mixes, I take whatever's left on my brush and I'm going to put it in these two wells, because I know that I'm going to mix yellow into both of those two colors to get that mix, and that way I don't waste very much of it. It should skew towards a primary red that's slightly warmer. Okay, so I've got that right here. And again, what's on my brush, I'll put some of it down here, some of it over here. Then I've got my black, and so that's quite opaque, definitely the most opaque of the three colors we have here. And I'm going to go ahead and again drop some of that into this part of the palette and into that part of the palette. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to mix this into the red, and it's a quite pretty purple that I'm getting here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put that down right down the center here. And then if I add a bit more red to it, I will get the red violet. And depending on how much red I want to add to it, it'll become a little bit more red. On this side, I can add a little bit more black, and that'll make this quite dark. Go ahead and add a bit more black onto this side, and a little bit of that goes a long way, so I'm going to go ahead and rinse that out and get the ochre in. And then now just add a little bit of ochre to that, and it'll give me this greenish color right here, okay? And then now if I add a bit more ochre to that, it'll give me this color, and I can add a little bit more black on the other side too. Let's see. Make it even dirtier, like a very dirty olive green kind of color there. And if I add even more yellow to it, it'll be a very slightly dirty ochre. So there's that opaque orange. And now if I want to add a bit more red to it, it'll turn into a red orange. And that's the cleanest that we can get these colors is along that side of the wheel, because we don't have any black in them. Everywhere else, all the other colors, the blue, the green, and the purples are all going to be dirtier. And these are still a relatively low chroma, because if you think about it, the ochre is not a full chroma color, it's an earthy yellow. Let's go ahead and just put the white down in the center there, and then I'm just going to patch it into some of these colors here, and you can see how when it goes opaque, you get those nice pastels. See how that's giving me some of those nice opaques, and you can do the same thing on this side. You can get that skin tone nice and opaque with those colors right there. Even though it's quite limited, it's also still quite diverse as a palette. And if you look at this painting, this is also an Andrew Zorn study, so you can actually really get any skin tone. That's why it's a great portrait palette, because the black is cool and the white is cool, and versus the yellow ochre and the vermilion are both warm. So you end up having that temperature contrast and also value contrast with this palette.
Will any black color do?
If you don't have anything around except for a Payne's Gray, you can do that as a stand-in. The perks of using a Payne's Gray, in fact, is that even though it's not an official Zorn palette, you will get better blues, right? Because it has a little bit more blue in it. So you'll actually end up getting more green greens and more purple purples. And that's, you know, a perk if you look at it one way, but also it's not the official palette. So we're painting the Blue Veil Master Study. And this is originally painted by Edmund Tarbell, and I've seen the original painting hanging up in San Francisco at, I think, the De Young Museum, right, is where it is. And Edmund Tarbell lived from 1862 to 1938, and he was an American Impressionist painter during the first 3 decades of the 20th century. So if you don't know what the Boston School is, it also refers to the American Impressionist School. Painterliness of Impressionism and that, creative color with the conservative, traditional, genteel painting of portraits and landscapes and young women posing in posh interiors. So if you were going to say it in 3 words, it's genteel and posh, but with an Impressionist color and brushstroke twist. He had a lot of big major influences, and those would include, of course, Claude Monet from the Impressionist movement, but also Jan Vermeer and John Singer Sargent. So that's why a little bit of that style is creeping into this. If you know who Sargent is, then it's, in here, and definitely Monet and the color influence. And Anders Leonard Zorn was born in 1860 and lived till 1920, and he's one of Sweden's best-known master painters. And he started in watercolor and later moved to oil. I also had the privilege of seeing some of his pieces in person, and they were very beautiful. And these 4 colors, lead white, yellow ochre, vermilion, and ivory black. We're not using lead white, of course, because it's poisonous. So you're using titanium white, hopefully. And if you don't have that, then zinc white is a stand-in, though it's more transparent. But that's what's known as the Zorn palette. And he did use his signature palette often, but it was, something that if he wanted to, he could also use an accent color, and I've seen some other beautiful paintings that he's done that have a lot of vibrant greens in them, so he didn't always use it, but he used it a lot. Trust me, it'll turn out okay, because we're just making a dirty background. Now, his is purple, and looks more purple, and it is so in my other study, because I didn't use the Zorn palette. You can bring it up right to the edge of the sketch, because we're going to deal with the edges later rather easily, because you're going to end up having gouache that sort of mixes and melts at the edges. Play around with it. This is going to be a moodier portrait than Tarbell's because we're doing the Zorn palette using a Tarbell painting. And the reason I chose this is a lot of Anders Zorn's pieces were too hard to do in 3 hours for people. It might seem stupid and pretentious to throw in your signature first before you've even finished painting it, but I tend to plan where it's going to plop down because it helps me understand the balance of the piece.
Why is it such a no-no to use white watercolor paint?
I think if you're painting in gouache, then you would be required to use white paint. So that's, it's okay for that. But in watercolor, which is probably what she's referring to, because most people say don't use white paint, is because it destroys the transparent luminosity of the watercolor. I've done all 3. I've done all transparent watercolor, I've done watercolor with just white accents, and I've also done gouache that's fully opaque. It should be a stain. So right now it just looks really heavy. I'm going to thin it down. So I'm going to make it into a very sheer stain.
Donna wants to know, would this staining be like an underpainting?
No, this is not grisaille or an underpainting. That's just a local color stain. An imprimatura, which would be not a grisaille but an overall underpainting, would make it so that the whole piece would be in some color, right? So we're not doing either. We're doing tiling today. This is just a local color stain with no grisaille and no imprimatura. And I'm making the eyelash line, like I said, more prominent than in his painting. You can see it's quite blurry, okay? He's lost the eyelashes. A V that goes in that shows the top lash line, and the top one is thicker, and the bottom one is a little bit thinner. Now, this is cold press paper from the front side, so on this side it's just going to go up into the hat, so what do I care if it's thicker? I can just, make a mess up on that side if I wanted. Because there's this bottom plane of the nose, and then this side plane of the nose. So think of those as you're drawing those lines in, and don't just draw a straight line. It keeps coming down the cheek. I can make the line hard now. We can soften it later. These Zorn pieces and Tarbell pieces are easier because there's just not as much detail to put in. So this is the piece we did in the last gouache class. So if you look at this piece versus this piece, you can see that there's more detail. This is way more loose and impressionist and sort of has that texture and loose strokes and everything. Look at how much more finish there is in this piece, right? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do the ear. So her hairline along her temple and her forehead here, it's that brownish purpley color. And I'm actually going to make her hair more red to accommodate the Zorn palette. The upper lip always comes out more, and then the bottom lip, even if it's fuller, actually in profile sits further behind in the bone structure of the face. Whiten up the background. That's going to mean just the white put in wet on dry, like so. What I'm going to do is add a little bit of white into my palette where I have the color that is my orange, and then that way I get a bit of that pink on one side. And I'm also going to put a little bit of the yellow on this side and get more of that yellow-ish color as a tint. Okay, so now this is turned into opaque skin colors. Purple-ish skin tone here, just by adding that same brush with that skin tone on it. Now it has a bit more purple in it and it's opaque. I'm going to blend it out afterwards. Okay, so the chin is a bit more purple, so let's go in and add a bit more purple to the chin in that color. I'm using the opaque yellow mix now, the more opaque one, right on the skin around it. Still haven't blended the tiles yet. Shouldn't look very pink next to this, so almost close to the pure ochre with a little bit of white in it. But a lot of this is a yellow base tone, okay, with the red and stuff coming in as the accent where the skin is flushed with blood more. A little bit more red on that side of the nose. 2 adjacent tiles right here, okay? So I've got that purplish red one and also that yellow one. Now I'm going to run it along the border here, and I should end up getting this blend because I've got 2 opaque tiles. And this is just a damp brush. If it's got too much water in it, this is not going to work. And I'm also going to go right up to the hairline so it blends that line into a soft line all around. And I'm blending this area right here. See how it's sort of mixing right on the paper? Not completely obliterated, but just lightened out. And I'm going to just use a tiny motion to disturb that paint and blend the edges out just a bit. Same thing for the lashes. I can down to the cheek now, where you do have more blurring. And it immediately just makes it more realistic by having those soft turning forms versus having the hard forms that you would have had if you were just leaving those tiles hard. Now, leaving the tiles hard is a technique. Some people do that, but it doesn't work for stuff that has to be more realistic, you know? You can come back and blend till the end of time because gouache is not waterproof. It's not like oil where you have a window or acrylic where you have an even shorter window. Now on the bottom here, I'm going to do the same thing. This line right here, I'm blending it inside. So blend it towards the inside, towards the form, not outside. And I'm just softening all of this now. I'm just softening all the paint I put down because I'm trying to see, just using the damp brush to soften it all. Softening the whole face everywhere. Highlight here. A little bit on that top lid right there. A little bit on the face structure here. And you can see the temperature difference because we used a cooler yellow and purples, and this one just has black and a warmer yellow. So it is going to be a nice different study in the temperature contrast because this one was not the Zorn palette. Now I'm using a damp brush again to come back in and blend my tiles in a bit more. Like this painting is 5 years old, and so I did that 5 years ago, and the painting is on YouTube, but it's not slow, it's fast. Make that a little bit fatter and make it curve around more and curve around. And suddenly it looks much more like a real nose, right? So there you go. And I'm also going to make sure I get that round part because it's kind of like faded off with my blending. So sometimes you just have to fix those things. Remember what I've said before, you know, painting is just a series of constant corrections. The rest in this piece is actually just the white background of the paper, and then I just put in tints as needed. I'm going to go ahead and put the white paint down, but you could, for large sections of white, you can and you should not waste all of your white and just use the white of the paper because, like I said, that's a luxury you have when you're using paper and not canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and poke some of that yellow into this direction. I went ahead and consolidated that. Now I'm going to get some more yellow and put it into some of these areas again. So it's almost like a scumbling stroke that I'm using here. Beautiful poof flame going up at the top of there. Clearly it's the hat with the veil and some feathers. And so it's that beautiful sort of fascinator hat combination that she's got on.
It does look like a flame. It doesn't look like a feather.
And this is starting to look like it's an aubergine veil, doesn't it? Eggplant colored. It's not going to be fully opaque, but because it is red, it's quite strong. And the reason I'm doing that is I want you to know where your hair is. I'm reminded to talk a little bit more about Zorn. I ended up painting a lot of really prominent figures, including King Oscar II of Sweden and 3 U.S. presidents, Grover Cleveland, William Taft, and Theodore Roosevelt. And he also, the year that he died, established a prize that was named after him. It was the Swedish Literary Bellman Prize in 1920. That was the same year that he passed away. And he also was famous for his clarity of rendering, his capturing of light and color, and also not having fussy details. So, and again, he had a lot of loose brushstrokes that are comparable to John Singer Sargent, a bit tighter than Fetchin. So, you know, Fetchin had even looser paint work than these two. But I think Zorn and Sargent are very comparable in that sense, and both of them were very famous during their lifetimes.
Donna said she's enjoying the class. She's learned so much about techniques and loves the bits of art history that you throw into the mix. So Patty says, gouache seems to be the best of both worlds with the dark to light and light to dark painting capability combined with ability to rework and water in perpetuity. What is the downside of gouache?
You can't do glazes. Because if I tried to glaze in this, you see how this is lifting and blending? That's what would happen. The positive side is that between watercolor and gouache, you can do everything that oil and acrylic will do. Without the fumes, without the ammonia in the plastic polymer and acrylic, and without the turpentine or solvent fumes from oil. So, and this was done with a grisaille value underpainting, where we did a gray underpainting throughout the whole thing. You can only really see it in the background now, and then we went over the top of it with a limited color scheme to get this Muha Master's study. And you wouldn't be able to do this in gouache. With gouache, you'd end up smearing it and covering it up. He was famous for doing his types of nudes. So just like Gibson was famous for doing, Charles Dana Gibson that is, for the Gibson girl, or George Petty was for the Petty girl, and Leyendecker was for the Leyendecker man, the arrow collar man. Zorn was famous for doing his nudes, which were his kula, or Dalla Kula, which was an unmarried young woman of peasant background, I should say the local peasant background. His nudes that he always showed, like somebody bathing by the river, or somebody, you know, taking a bath, or doing, you know, these positions that people in the past always found they could paint nude women without getting too much criticism was in those situations, and so that's where they did that. Or for mythical subjects for other painters. In his case, he was doing non-mythical subjects for the most part, so he usually said this was, you know, somebody just bathing by the river or bathing in their house. And so in this one, we ended up having the purple and darker purple and the white in the background. In this case, we end up having what is our darker purple and our lighter purple, and then the lighter part in the background. And this is feeding right through this area right here. So this is where we'd actually now streak that in, like so, and probably make it more purple, because otherwise it'll just blend into that hair, which is what I was saying earlier. Just going to make that hair red, and I didn't want it to be too much the same color as the hair, to this part of her cheek, and then whips down and goes right through her lips, okay? It's not such a big deal because we didn't really paint in any lips, so there's not really much to obliterate. You see what I'm saying? Look at the mood difference. This looks like this is like on a blustery, cold winter day, and the other one really does look like it's in the evening on spring. And that's why I love the limited color schemes, is you can't get more bang for your buck as far as mood goes. It just makes you look so pro to have different color schemes that look so good. Every once in a while you can use a spectral color scheme, which is all of the colors in your box, and that is a color scheme, but it's only one color scheme, and oftentimes it's too many colors and too garish for it to work for everything, you know? 3 is the most common number, is some kind of triad, but sometimes 4, and complements with just 2 colors is another great option. So, you know, but 6 maximum, which is the 2 split primaries where you get a warm and cool red, a warm and cool yellow, and a warm and cool blue, and that's it, is probably my most, is the maximum colors I'd ever use. The Zorn palette, of course, only has 4 colors. It's almost like you saw her in the late evening when there was less light, you know? And of course we could have made it look like a way more well-lit painting if we had decided to go back and use, like I said, different colors for different areas. So we could have used a red hat and a red veil or a yellow veil or something else. And it would, you know, depending on how we used our colors differently, we could have ended up with different colors in those areas.
Heather says the moody reds go great with the purples. And Patty says it's a great lesson. Thanks so much.
I'm glad everybody enjoyed it. Wishing you all epic art adventures.